Made up of 4 California girls who dreamed of being the female equivalent of the Beatles, the Bangles, with their brand of 60s influenced garage pop songs, would prove that rock and roll wasn't just a good old boys club. The quartet would go on to have several top 10 hits through their first run in the 80s and sell 10 million records, but by the end of the 80s the band was miserable and splitting at the seams. Today, let's take a look at whatever happened to the power pop group The Bangles. The Peterson sisters Vicky and Debbie were born several years apart in the early 60s, and they would grow up in Northridge, a Los Angeles suburb on the edge of the San Fernando Valley. Vicky spent hours in her room as a kid listening to her favorite records and playing guitar to them, while her younger sister Debbie split her time between playing air drums, air guitar, and miming lyrics in the mirror with hairbrushes. Their father would be an aerospace engineer while their mother would work as a model and for a short period of time for local California Congressman Glenn Anderson. Their parents would nurture their daughter's interest in music, having it playing pretty much throughout the entire day through the family's intercom system. It was in school Debbie was more mild-mannered and studious, while her sister Vicky wasn't going to let school get in the way of her pursuing her dreams of becoming a musician. She started her first band in the 9th grade, and while most of her peers in the Valley were listening to 70s hard rock groups like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, Vicky's band looked to the 60s, taking inspiration from groups like the Hollies, the Byrds, Love, and the Beatles. Vicky's band was without a drummer though, and she would end up buying her sister Debbie a drum kit to fill the vacant spot in their group. The kit wasn't free though. Debbie had to pay her sister back from her part-time job working at McDonald's. They would go through several names before landing on Cuckoo and the Doo-Doo Heads. I'm not joking about that name. It was by 1980 the sisters were playing under the same moniker, and Vicky was now at UCLA studying English while living with her sister and another girl they were in a band with. But the Peterson sisters couldn't quite get the sound that they were looking for, with Debbie telling the Washington Post, "We never had 2 people who could sing well enough to do the harmonies we wanted to do. We had to find the right females." They wouldn't have to look very far, as soon enough a new movement in Los Angeles sprouted up called the Paisley Underground. The movement would be defined by that 60s sound that the sisters were influenced by, and well, Paisley shirts. The sisters' future bandmates Susanna Hoffs and future Mazzy Star founder David Roback would play together in several bands while Hoffs was in college, including the group Unconscious. Roback and Hoffs were romantically involved during this time, but once their relationship ended, they would go their separate ways. Hoffs, for her part, would grow up to well-off parents who moved to Los Angeles in the 50s from the East Coast after attending prestigious schools like Harvard and Yale. Her father was a psychoanalyst and her mother a writer-director in Hollywood. She would tell Rolling Stone she was raised in what she referred to as, and I quote, "an atheist intellectual creative world." She would pick up guitar in elementary school, and her parents helped foster her early love of music. Hoffs would attend Berkeley, and she would recall how one year her brother came back from school with albums from groups like the Ramones, Blondie, and the Talking Heads. It was also during her time in college that she attended shows by Patti Smith and even attended Sex Pistols' infamous final show in San Francisco at the Winterland Ballroom. Couple these experiences with the death of John Lennon in 1980, and Hoffs was convinced that she now wanted to pursue a career in music. It was now 1981, and Hoffs had graduated from Berkeley, and soon enough, her and the Peterson sisters' paths would cross when Hoffs would respond to an ad in a paper called The Recycler. The woman whose ad she responded to was actually roommates with the Peterson sisters, but she was fired from their band. When Hoffs placed the call, it was one of the Peterson sisters who picked up the phone, and they had instant rapport. The Peterson sisters and Hoffs soon learned that they shared a common love of the 60s era music, and they were both greatly impacted by the death of John Lennon. They agreed to form a band rehearsing in Hoffs' garage. Susanna would tell Rolling Stone, "It was really scary. I remember talking to Vicky in the kitchen about a week after we decided to form the band, and I suddenly got these butterflies in my stomach. It was like I'd married a stranger." Vicky, meanwhile, would add, "Debbie and I had gone through a series of playing with women and men who were trying to be in bands, but they were always lacking that sense of commitment. The band would go through a few different monikers, calling themselves the Colours, which paid homage to their British influences by spelling colours the British way with a U. They eventually became the Supersonic Bangs, which took inspiration from an Esquire magazine article about the popular 60s haircut. Then they shortened their name to simply The Bangs, and Hoffs would tell Rolling Stone, "You can read a lot into it. There was something kind of gutsy about it." The Bangs soon started playing local clubs, setting aside some money to record a single that was titled Getting Out of Hand. Hoffs would dress up in a miniskirt and personally hand-deliver the single to a DJ named Rodney Bingenheimer, who had a show on local radio station K-Rock, and he played the song on the air. The single helped boost the band's popularity, and it was during this time they would round out their lineup with bass player Ned Zelinskis. One of the band's first big breaks following the single getting airtime on K-Rock was playing a benefit show for the fanzine No Magazine. Vicky would tell the LA Times about that gig. The kids that were there were basically kids that were going to listen to Channel 3 and the Descendants and stuff, and they were not what we thought were an audience that would accept us playing Paul Revere and the Raiders. I remember there were a bunch of kids, a bunch of skinheads going, "Can't believe it. Skinheads slam dancing to the Seeds? What is this?" I just said, "Alright, we got 'em." The Bangs would blend together a healthy mix of 60s folk, pop, and rock, taking cues from the Beatles, the Byrds, and Buffalo Springfield, as well as garage bands like the Seeds, as well as the Hollies and the Mamas and the Papas. In fact, later on in their career, some in the press would dub them the Mamas and the Mamas. Soon enough, Miles Copeland, the manager of the Police, got the attention of the group and signed them to his label Faulty Records. But the relationship didn't really get off to an easy start, as Copeland was already managing another LA band, the Go-Go's. In 1982, the Bangs recorded a 5-song EP for their new label, but then with a week prior to releasing it, they would hit a snag when an East Coast band already laid claim to the name and demanded $40,000 for the female group to use it. They ultimately decided to change their moniker, making it the Bangles. Vicky would tell Bill DeYoung, "We were really heartsick about it because I really liked the name. I liked the innuendo and the sound of it. It was explosive and short, so we just tried to keep the syllable in the word. Even though Bangles is a much softer image and a much softer sound, we felt like we'd already established an identity as the Bangs." The Bangles would go on their first tour opening for the British ska punk band English Beat, and they were put through the ringer. The audience would pelt the Bangles with debris including milk, gum, cartons, and frequently gave them the finger. They would refer to it as, and I quote, "character building." Making matters worse is that their record label would fold while they were on the road. Luckily for the Bangles, there was one major record label who showed interest in the group, and that was Columbia. The band, however, was suspicious of outsiders, including Columbia, with Vicky telling the Washington Post, "When we signed, we were so suspicious of anyone trying to take advantage of us that I brought a tape recorder to meetings. You hear horror stories, and we've been doing it on our own for so long that we'd always been able to turn away the shysters." Something that the Bangles would have to deal with for their entire career was that the press would harp on the fact that they were an all-girl group, and of course you had the constant comparisons to the Go-Go's. And the band admittedly downplayed the comparisons, with Hoffs admitting years later, "We always downplayed the Go-Go's influence, but the truth is, I loved them and I loved the idea of partnering up with other girls." It was following their signing with Columbia, the band didn't really make a big announcement to their fans they'd already earned up until this point, fearing it might alienate them. It was around the time of signing with Columbia, the band lost bassist Ned Zelinskis, who joined her boyfriend's group, a cowpunk outfit named Blood on the Saddle. Also contributing to her decision to leave was that she wanted to have a bigger role in singing, something the other members disagreed with. With their record deal on the line, the Peterson sisters' new roommate Michael Steele would be enlisted to join the group, and she had previously played in the Runaways. I do want to point out that the band did audition several male musicians. When looking for a bass player, soon enough Columbia Records enlisted producer David Kahn to work with the Bangles on their debut record, but it would be an excruciating experience for the band, with Debbie telling Billy DeYoung, "We were tortured by David Kahn. For example, on going down to Liverpool, he made me cry because I had to do the first line over and over. I kept thinking, it was sounding great to me, and he was like, do it again, do it again." But despite the obstacles in creating the record, the members conceded that the producer was a master at coming up with vocal arrangements. Ahead of the album's release, the label would give the band an image makeover, making them more accessible, more sexual, and looking less like their garage rock days. Hoffs would recall to Billy DeYoung, "In general, the glamorization of the Bangles happened because there were more outside people in there messing with us. We didn't have enough perspective to say no. You want to look good and you get caught up in, oh, let's give you bigger hair." While their debut record wouldn't be a huge commercial success, it did receive rave reviews, it got decent airplay on college radio, and it did well in Europe, and they even scored an opening slot for Columbia's top priority at the time, Cyndi Lauper. The Bangles spent many months on the road, maybe to their detriment. By the time attention turned to their second record in the summer of 1985, The band really hadn't allotted a lot of time to start writing new material. On top of that, the label was insistent that they work with Khan once again, and the members of the Bangles admit that they were naive and didn't know that they could fire their producer. But Khan attempted to smooth things over prior to getting into the recording studio, telling the members that he had changed and that their second record would be a much better experience, but that wasn't the case. The Bangles' first record also did something else. It caught the attention of 80s megastar Prince, and it was in 1985 Prince joined the group on stage at a show in Los Angeles. It was within a few weeks after that appearance, he sent the band a demo that contained 2 songs, Jealous Girl and Manic Monday, telling them they could use either of the tracks for their forthcoming record. The Bangles opted to record Manic Monday, but they would end up modifying the song, simplifying the bridge and changing some of the chords. But the band members were naive about just how good the song was and what the record label's plans were with it. Debbie would tell Billy DeYoung, "I thought, well, we can record it, but in my innocence, I didn't see the grand scheme until very soon after we recorded it. Why is David Kahn spending 2 weeks mixing this one song and 20 minutes on every other one?" Manic Monday would be the band's key to getting on radio and MTV. Released as the lead single, it would peak at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, and Manic Monday would be credited to Christopher, which was Prince's moniker in the movie Under the Cherry Moon. The success of the song soon started rumors that Prince and Susanna Hoffs were an item, something their record label pounced on to help push record sales and publicity, but the Bangles themselves, their management, and Prince's camp fought against these assertions. Despite the success of Manic Monday, it wasn't the biggest hit on the album. That accolade would go to one of their follow-up singles, Walk Like an Egyptian, which was a song written by Liam Sternberg, and it was originally recorded by Charlie Sexton and would be originally presented to MCA Records, who turned down the song. As part of Columbia's effort to source more material for the Bangles' second album, they got their hands on the demo, and it would be producer David Kahn who heard the demo and liked it so much and presented it to the Bangles, who agreed to record it. But the song created tensions in the band, as the producer's behavior once again frustrated the band. Kahn was a visionary, and he saw the members pushing back against him as a roadblock. Walk Like an Egyptian only had 3 verses, so the producer cut Debbie from the song, and she doesn't even play drums on the track either. According to her, she couldn't get the part quite to the producer's liking, and even her sister Vicky wasn't immune from being cut out of the recording sessions, as Kahn would bring in a guitar player to play on the solo for September Girls. Why did the producer behave this way? Well, Hoffs had her own theories, recalling to Billy DeYoung, "I remember thinking, boy, being a producer is a hard job. I think he made it seem really hard because he was so driven by angst and kind of perfectionistic. He had been an artist himself and never succeeded as an artist. I think he was always tormented by, how would I do this if it was my record?" The group's second album, Different Light, was a massive success and the biggest of their career, selling 3 million copies in America. It was following the success of Different Light that the media started singling out Susanna Hoffs, making it seem like she was the lead singer of the band, and the band was more like Susanna Hoffs and the Bangles. Soon enough, media outlets only wanted to interview and photograph her, and the label only wanted to release singles that prominently featured her voice as well. She would tell Rolling Stone, "I think I can't change the way the world perceives the band. There's someone in the Bangles for everybody. What we do is a collaboration. You can't take out any member of the band and still have the Bangles." It was in 1987 that Hoffs would appear in the film The All-Nighter with Joan Cusack, a movie her mother wrote and directed. While the movie was a bomb, Hoffs is featured prominently in the film. It was the following year the band contributed a cover of the Simon & Garfunkel song A Hazy Shade of Winter to the film Less Than Zero. The song proved to be a success, and it would end up peaking at number 2 on the Billboard charts. The Bangles began work on their third record titled Everything, and they opted this time not to work with Kahn. But the last few years had changed the dynamics in the band, and something just wasn't feeling right. Hoffs would recall to Billy DeYoung, "I knew things were tense, but I was just used to it. We were all used to it. It was just part of the fact that we just didn't know how to talk about things when they didn't feel good. We didn't have any way to have a group Bangles therapy session." To cope with the changing dynamics, more outside songwriters were enlisted to help write the group's third record, including former Kiss guitarist Vinnie Vincent, Billy Steinberg, and Tom Kelly, both of whom wrote Like a Virgin and True Colors. But by far the album's biggest hit would be the single Eternal Flame, that would initially draw some comparisons to the Beatles' tune Here, There, and Everywhere. The song would be inspired by the Bangles' visit to Graceland, with Hoffs telling the New York Times, "When we visited Elvis's home, we went to the back where they have the grave, and it was just raining. At the head of the grave, there was this plexiglass box half filled with water. We asked what it was, and the tour guide said it was the eternal flame." Hoffs would admit in a separate interview with the Washington Post that within an hour the lyrics were done. However, guitarist Vicky wasn't a fan of the song, recalling, "Whitney Houston would have had a huge hit with it. Anyone could have had a huge hit with it. It was not a Bangles song. To me, it was a really well-written pop song. There's nothing wrong with that, but I felt completely emotionally divorced from a lot of the music that was happening." Eternal Flame, a song that featured Hoffs' lead vocals, was released as a single from the album and shot to number 1 on the charts in 9 countries. The song, coupled with the singles In Your Room and Be With You, would propel their third record, Everything, to sell 1 million copies stateside. Hoffs would look back, however, at the recording of the album, telling the Sun Sentinel in 1989, "I'm proud of our last album, but it was really painful to make. It ended up being like the Beatles' White Album, where we were essentially serving as each other's backup band." Ahead of the band hitting the road to support the record, Debbie Peterson would marry one of the band's sound engineers, Steve Botting, but both Susanna and Michael never showed up to the wedding, hurting Debbie and only furthering the divisions in the group. As the Bangles turned their attention to tour on their third record, they would also fire their longtime manager Miles Copeland. It would prove to be one of the worst decisions they made, as they would admit in VH1's Behind the Music. The band's reasoning was that Copeland wasn't around to hear the members' grievances or concerns, or try to heal the divisions in the band, as he was too busy attending to his bigger clients. They would enlist new managers Arnold Stiefel and Randy Phillips, but from the start their new management's approach was to divide and conquer an already divided band. They would continually push Susanna to pursue a solo career, telling her that she didn't need the others. Also chipping away at the band was their treatment in the press. Being an all-girl group resulted in some accusations against the band, and they would be interviewed by their hometown paper, the LA Times, in 1989 to promote their third record. The Times would even assemble a list of the top 10 biggest criticisms, rumors that were levied against the band at this point in time. Despite the internal turmoil, they still hit the road to support Everything, but it was obvious that the end was near. Debbie would recall what that last tour was like to Billy DeYoung, remembering, "The last tour, we all had such bad stomach aches. We thought we were getting ulcers. Michael was sleeping a lot because she was so depressed. We were not doing well." It was in September of 1989 the band would attend a management meeting, and it was at this time Susanna revealed her plans to go solo, and that she didn't want to make another record with the Bangles. Only 6 months prior, the band had tore up the charts thanks to the single Eternal Flame. Vicky would move to New Orleans and join the group Continental Drifters, and even played with the Go-Go's for their mid-90s reunion tour. Then in March of 1991, Hoffs released her debut solo record, When You're a Boy, but her album stalled, only peaking at number 83 on the charts. She would admit to VH1 that being a solo artist was a lot more work than she had planned. It was a few years later Hoffs started to regret her decision to leave the group and wanted to put the wheels in motion to instigate a reunion. Initially, Debbie and Vicky were reluctant, and Michael still wanted time to heal from the split, and her father would be diagnosed with cancer in 1993 and would pass away by 1998. It was a year later her mother also passed away. Susanna would end up marrying director Jay Roach in 1993, who she would meet on a blind date. Roach, who was a big movie director, would actually be instrumental in helping the Bangles reunite. Roach would end up directing all of the Austin Powers movies. The band would reunite to record the song Get the Girl for the second Austin Powers movie, which came out in 1999, and a reunion tour would follow in 2000. They soon started to work on the Bangles' first record in nearly a decade, 2003's Doll Revolution, and it would also be the final album to feature Michael Steele on bass. She would end up leaving the group due to her disagreement with the members over both touring and recording. In 2001, the band was in the news, but not for a good reason. It was following the 9/11 attacks. Radio conglomerate Clear Channel issued a memo to radio stations of songs that were deemed inappropriate, and one of them would be Walk Like an Egyptian, something that incensed the band. But it wasn't the first time the song created issues, as in 1991, the BBC banned the song during the Gulf War. The band's manager would issue a statement in response to the memo stating, "None of this stuff is logical at this point. Logic is out the window and emotions have taken over." I always love irony, and this is a perfect example. On October 2nd, 2001, the Bangles were booked to play a private show for the winners of a contest that was held last spring by the History Channel as part of its series titled Egypt Before the Pyramids. The party would be at Las Vegas' Luxor Hotel, with the History Channel and the Bangles making Egypt a centerpiece of the set. To top it off, the promotional company involved in the contest was owned by Clear Channel, and the band would release their latest LP, 2011's Sweetheart of the Sun. In 2018, Annette Zelinskis would rejoin the group as a permanent member, marking the first time the original lineup would play together since 1983. It was the same year the band would also put out a compilation record featuring other bands of the Paisley Underground movement called 3x4, and the Bangles have been mostly inactive over the past several years, with their last live show happening in 2019. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have suggestions for future topics, let me know in the description box below.